Welcome to Raise 'em Rugged, the podcast for parents wishing to raise confident, adventurous, anti-fragile children who are ready to take on life's challenges. Let's get started.
So Adam, and the pronunciation of your last name? Munce? Yeah, well, there you go. So thanks for agreeing to come and chat, raising kids that aren't too soft. Give a little introduction about what your background, your interests, and what the venture is that you're starting up and what your hopes are for it.
So my name is Adam Munce. As you said, we just bought a forest school property in St. George near Paris because we've been sort of hoping to build a forest school for quite some time, and we finally took the leap. We got here in late August. We got 8 acres, beautiful Carolinian forest, perfect for a forest school. So we're getting the administrative side going, talking to people in business and insurance, and getting the logistical side of it going. Slowly chipping away. We were originally hoping for September, but we've had a lot of people reaching out. There's a big interest in alternative education learning pods, homeschooling groups, and forest schools and outdoor education and stuff like that. So we see there's a big market for it, a growing market. So I think our timing's fantastic. I'm a teacher in the Waterloo board, as is my wife. I've been in for about 10 years. She's probably closer to 15. And she's lately been doing spec ed, special education, resource teaching. I got to stay in the music world when I am in a long-term occasional. I've resisted the contract teaching so far because I like the freedom of floating around and seeing new schools, meeting new kids, meeting new administrators and teachers, and sort of making connections and not being tied down to one place and one role. Yeah, so we're trying to get out of public school as things are sort of changing a little bit. We really like the idea of a forest school. We like the concepts, the underlying concepts of it. We think it would be a really beneficial way to raise your kids, to have the opportunities presented by a forest school. So we're pretty excited. It's going to be pretty great.
Yeah, I'd never heard of the term forest school until like 2 or 3 years ago, and now I hear it all over the place. We built a play space for one out in Wellesley a couple of years ago now, as associated with the daycare, and I had never really heard the concept. So I guess a couple questions. So one, what is sort of driving you to want to leave, you and your wife to want to leave the public education realm? And what do you think is driving the big interest in alternative forms of education, be it forest schools or learning pods, or I think the rise in homeschooling alone is unprecedented, but you didn't hear about it 10 years ago, and now I hear about it all over the place. It's not quite so fringe. So,
all right, yeah. Without getting too political about public education, there's some shortcomings there that I think are becoming more apparent as the world's changing. Perhaps a small example would be something like, they're pushing towards all-inclusive classrooms, which is great, but they also have like standardized testing. So having kids at various levels, like any classroom you go into now, regardless of the grade, you're not just teaching a grade 3 classroom. You might have some children in there who are working at, grade 1 level up to grade 4 level. So, you have a big span of needs, diverse needs, ever increasingly diverse population, and significant increases to autoimmune issues and autism and ADHD are just skyrocketing. And we're really trying to adapt to that and to meet the kids where they are, but there's some areas that are just sort of really hard to change, systematic stuff that's really hard to progress out of. So we're kind of losing our passion for teaching in public ed. Like at first it was, we were really passionate about, you're helping kids, you're teaching, you're learning yourself, and there's just been some things coming up that are tough to stomach. Like there's really kind of a push to put every kid in a box that they may not naturally fit into. Well, the biggest one that bugs me is a lot of boys, especially, are just really busy bodies. They want to be active. It's challenging for them to sit in a classroom for 6 hours of their school day and be at a desk and have their attention here and be told what to do, what to learn, how to behave. So there's this busybody kids who they need to be moving, they need to be standing, they need to be engaged, they need to physical learning environment, which isn't always provided in public education. So I just kind of resent the fact that a lot of teachers kind of want to stuff them into that box. Like, sit down, and it's tough to teach a class for a lot of people and a lot of kids. And if you have a busybody kid, I understand that, but I think we need to do a better job of meeting them where they are, giving them opportunities to learn the way that they need to learn, rather than saying you need to sit still. And if you can't sit still, there's something wrong with you. You have this attention issue or defiance issue, or something it's almost creating something out of nothing, just because they can't fit in that box that we want to stuff them in. So that's been growing more and more hard for me to witness on a daily basis. So medicating these kids who might not need to be medicated. I understand there's situations where appropriate medication can really help a child learn. There's also situations where I don't think it's necessary, and there's alternative ways we could do it without having to push meds on them. So fitting everybody in the box doesn't work.
Yeah, fitting everyone in a box. And you talked about the idea of the all-inclusive classroom, which is my understanding now is more special needs kids, which it sounds great. Have them integrated into the class. Like when we went to school quite a long time ago, it was separate rooms, separate classes, especially ones that were very highly developmentally challenged, right? And so I see them being included is theoretically some benefit, but are you seeing that it's actually, is it a benefit to those children, or do they end up getting less attention than they truly need because they're included with the rest of the kids out of the sake of inclusivity?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Like it can be beneficial to all. And if you have a strong teacher, you have a strong support staff and a strong administrator and special ed team, if your team's cohesive, the parents are on board and you're working and functioning as an integrative team, I've seen it work really well. But if there's a weak link there, sometimes it can go bad for any party, whether it's the child with the needs or the other kids in the classroom or the teacher, or like you said, on paper it sounds great, like the idea sounds great, but in practice it just doesn't always work. Sometimes there's just not the right allocation of resources in specific schools. They might not have proper EA support, and it's challenging for a lot of people. It's challenging, like we were saying before, when you have you already have grade 1 to grade 4 level, and then you have a couple of kids in there who really need that one-on-one time. And there might be some serious behavior stuff, like the EA might have to have training for restraints and wear protective equipment and all that. And it just gets really complex.
So you have so I guess you'd know a series of different even case studies. Because I could see you would want your children that were in that situation to not feel like they're such an anomaly that they're not even allowed to integrate. Like I said, when I was in school, we didn't integrate whatsoever. Is there, or was there ever more of a middle ground that was a partial or a once in a while integration versus a full integration, where you're saying now where it could be of great benefit if everyone is firing on all cylinders, everyone is focused and trained and passionate, but if it doesn't work that way, then both the child who needs it isn't getting the attention they need, and the other kids in the class, it could backfire, right? Is there something in between?
Sometimes when they're working to see if a kid can be integrated, they'll do it in small steps, and sort of, they'll come into classroom for a little bit and see how they do and try out a few things. But it does seem to kind of be, if they show that they can be integrated, then they put them in there eventually full time. I think a part-time type of thing could work. Logistically, it may be hard in some areas, but it's just a complex beast. It's hard to know which is the right way to go.
So that various other political things, what what you're seeing as far as the way kids really what they need and need to learn. I just did a interview yesterday that will be going up as well with Adam Bienenstock. He was sort of the main figure that brought natural playgrounds to Canada and largely to North America, and rhymed off numerous. He was like an encyclopedia of statistics of the different ailments that go away and to what percentage when the kids are just allowed to work on schoolwork outside or have more than just their 15 minutes of play outside. And he was rhyming off stats of ADHD has reduced by X amount of percent simply because of really fascinating. So when that goes up, he's a really interesting guy. So he spent his career now on really working with schools and school boards, mainly at developing natural play spaces, but then really understanding the psychology of how that affects children when they're in these play spaces and the results of their behavior afterwards. It's pretty wild.
Wow, that does sound super interesting. I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah. Look up. I'll send you some links after. We'll have it when the podcast is up. So parents that are you've been talking to a good number of parents. You seem to see a lot of demand or interest in what you're proposing and what you're doing. What are the main concerns you're hearing from parents as for why they want to leave the public school system?
A lot of it is just opportunities to be outside, to learn outside. A lot of people have the memories in the childhood that they remember. Kids played outside more. Kids were, your mom might say, come home when the streetlights come on, or, when the sun goes down, come home. There was a lot more freedom, a lot less fear to just let your kids go and experience life without you having to just constantly observe them and be worried about them. So I think people are seeing that there's not as much opportunities for kids to be outside and to be playing. And as social media is taken off and the internet and everybody's got their own personal devices, kids are even now more disconnected from everything. So I think they just want more of a connection with outside, being in nature, being on the land, being in the forest, being around rivers, interacting with animals and plants and stuff like that. And I think there's disconnection in the home, and I think they intuitively understand that the balance for that is nature, being outside and learning in the natural environment. That's mostly what we get. Of course, the last 2 years has been pretty different for everybody and sort of exacerbated all those issues of like online learning, more screen time, right? More disconnect, less interaction with their peers. And, it's been really hard for everybody. So I think that's sort of put a fire under that notion that we need to get reconnected to nature. So the last 2 years, it just sort of like stoked those flames and people are like, okay, let's make these changes. Let's do this.
Yeah. And get them out. The last couple of years, seeing our kids at home attempting, my boys are 6 and 8 and attempting to do online learning for a kindergarten kid. Like really? I would rather. So my days, if I was at home with them, the computer wasn't likely coming on. We were going and mucking around. We're going to go muck around outside. You're not missing much at that age. That what did you miss there? You missed how to spell 5 words that day. You're like, and I know the mask thing has been contentious too. I start to get to the point of still seeing my guys hop on the bus or get off the bus with these masks on their beautiful little faces, and I'm just like, it's enough already. You look at other countries that never mask kids, I'm like, so I can imagine that the last 2 years is really, it's been making us seriously think of alternative means for a variety of reasons. And this is part of it, everything you're talking about, as well as the, what's brought on by COVID, right?
I hear you. I can't, it almost triggers me when I see my boys in a mask. And we tried sending them the mesh ones. We tried getting them out of it. And we tried all kinds of things. We kept my eldest home last year, the whole year. We didn't send him, but we had that. We're lucky, we're fortunate because we're teachers, right? And my wife was on mat leave with our youngest. So we were in a lucky situation where we could do that. We could keep him home and homeschool him. And she had the curriculum done in an hour to 2 hours because it's one kid. And you're flexible with your day. You might see some math here while you're out driving in the grocery store that you can have a conversation and cover those concepts. So she was getting it done really quick, but it's always balancing that social component and helping them have a normal life with, it's a tough balance.
Yeah. So you're outside teaching. It's a lot of exploring in nature, the things you're talking about. And then as far as, I imagine a criticism would be, well, what about your reading, writing, and arithmetic? Like, you integrate that into the other things you're doing? Are there sort of sit down pen and paper times that you incorporate into the day? Give me a rundown of what a day looks like for a kid that's fully dedicated. Say someone who's doing a forest school full time as a replacement for public school, as opposed to maybe it being a once a week thing. What's their daily rundown?
Well, a lot of it is sort of child-centered. It's like an emergent learning type of focus where you sort of let your day and the child and the land guide your learning. And then you back where it's connected to the curriculum. So, for example, we might go out on a walk in the forest and we'll see a tree has fallen over that wasn't there before. And we'll talk about that. We'll try to find ways that we can connect that back to math, to language, to reading and writing. So rather than having this concrete concept of like, okay, I have to teach this part of the curriculum, this expectation, and then planning from there and giving it to the child, you sort of let the child and the day emerge on its own, and then you find a way to connect it to the curriculum. Reading, writing, and math, of course, like you said, are huge. Parents don't want that to be missed out. So, being qualified teachers, we have that skill to be able to do that. So a lot of it is also inquiry-based learning. So using the kids' own inquiries, own curiosities, own questions to sort of shape and guide it. Inquiry-based, emergent-based, child-centered type of approach. And then, you attach it back. So you might spend a week on that fallen tree and find different ways to tie it to math. Maybe we say, let's map out where this tree was. So we have an aerial of the land, and we say, okay, where is this on that map? How can we find it? You can tie it to mapping. You can tie it to science and life cycles. You could tie it to writing about what you could do with that wood, what you could build with that wood. Yeah, it's kind of a collaborative approach with the land, the child, the facilitator, the parents, and the curriculum. But you're right, parents don't want to miss out on a curriculum. So that's a big thing we've been coming up to, is like my kids' education has been interrupted through COVID for the last 2 years. So if I put him in forest school, how do I know he's not going to fall further behind? So that assurance that it will be tied to the curriculum. It might not be like, this is exactly what we're going to do through this week. It might be sort of more of a reflexive thing, like, here, this is what we discovered. This is how we're going to tie it to language and reading and math.
Right. So you're still following the provincial curriculum guidelines, is what you're saying, which is a completely different approach to teaching that information.
Yes. Yeah. And like the curriculum itself is huge. There's no teacher ever in the history of this modern curriculum that has ever gone through it all in a year.
Right.
Like they tell you pick these bits and pieces and focus on the big ideas. So you get your big ideas, and then you go into the curriculum and you look and you pick your expectations that you're going to do, but you never cover it all.
Right.
There's so many entry points that you can use. It is gigantic, and there's many, many ways you can tie it to, especially being an experienced teacher and working with the curriculum for a number of years. You just instinctively know how to tie it together.
And then, so having all different mixed ages within the school, you're sort of tailoring each child's learning to the curriculum for the age that they're at as you go along throughout your day as well then. So it's really almost like the old style one-room schoolhouse idea, where there's 10 kids in the town. They're all different ages. They're all being taught, slightly different. I guess it's something like that, except not rowed out in desks under fluorescent lights.
Yeah, it can be. There's so many different ways. Like some people do operate it where their kids are going in multiple days a week. Pretty much maybe the middle ground standard would be you would send your kid for a day, and for that one day they'd be at for school and the rest they'd be in their school situation, right? But we did a couple learning pods where we had 3 to 6 year olds. We had 6 3 to 6 year olds with one teacher, and 6, 7, and 9 year olds. Each pod had its own range, and we sort of did our thing. And then you can link together for activities so that they are experiencing learning with different age spheres. There's so many different ways you can do it. That's part of the challenges we're seeing, is how to start it, right? Because you can really do it a vast number of ways. So kind of honing in how we want to start it, how many teachers we want to have, how many different groups, and we're sort of just figuring that out as we go, type of thing.
Right. So it's not necessarily tied to some sort of governing agency like For School International, if anything like that exists, or it sounds like somewhat Montessori concepts, but it's not a Montessori school. So
yeah, there is one that sort of has, I think it's called Roots and Wings. They sound like they got a really great program. I've heard great things about them, and they have, they'll get some facilitators and they'll rent some land, and they have their own curriculum. I believe it's on par with the Ontario curriculum, and they've come up with together. So they would hire teachers to say, you want to run a For School. Here's our curriculum. Here's the location, and yeah, sounds pretty cool.
I see. So they've created a system or a template, so you don't have to sit here and try to figure it out sort of from scratch, and you can sort of plug into their template.
Yeah, lots of potential. We really like the reflexive approach, not only in like how we're going to teach our kids, but how we're going about the business. As we go, we meet people, we talk about it. We're looking for multiple ways to collaborate with local community here. Like our neighbor has 66 acres, and they run a landscaping company, and they just want to be a part of it. And we just met the guy today. We were looking for some live edge wood to build a bar top on our house. And we met a guy down the road who has a little wood lot, and he loves the idea. He wants to be a part of it as well. We met a logger who's like, I would love to come in and teach kids more about what the trees are, why we cut them down, how we cut them down, what we can do with the wood, and every keeping a reflexive kind of approach and an open-minded, collaborative mindset. It's sort of helping us guide it. Like we need the structure and the vision, but we also like sort of meeting people as we go, such as yourself, and we'll check out your podcast as they come up and see what else that brings us, that open-minded growth mindset type of thing.
Yeah, I like it. No, it sounds great. We can maybe incorporate something with our little mini adventures we're going on for the other side of the Raise Them Rugged video series. There could be something to incorporate there with what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure.
A whole team of river rats going down the river, catching crayfish and climbing up the sandbanks, so.
Right on.
Yeah, the kids love it. Cool. Well, man, I think that's not a bad spot to wrap up for this meeting. And I think we plan a time to chat again as you develop a bit more with what you're doing.
That sounds great.
And then, have a plan. Have you and your boys come out and we muck around the property, see what else we can come up with.
Yeah, and you guys are welcome to come out here too and see the forest, and we'd love to pick your brain a little bit too and see, everyone's got a fresh perspective. You might come out here and see and be like, hey, what about this? This might work here. This might, help out.
Very cool. Well, let's talk again soon.
Sure. Great to meet you, Derek.
Awesome. You as well.
Thanks for listening to the Raise 'em Rugged podcast. We'll see you again next time as we continue on this parenting journey. Be sure to like, subscribe, download, and rate the show. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and other social media outlets.